My name is John Drazen. I'm a PhD candidate in biomedical engineering from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I'm also the STEM director for Fourth Family Incorporated, which is a grassroots nonprofit based out of Albany, New York. So today I'm going to be presenting our project From Sports to Science, using sports analytics to broaden the appeal of math and science among youth. So as we're all aware in this room, over the past decade, analytics and sports science has revolutionized the NBA. So these advances vary from the installation of sports view cameras in the rafters of NBA arenas that allow for detailed player tracking and analysis, to the development of high-level sports science labs where athletes, trainers, and scientists collaborate to optimize athletic performance. As a result, the number of sports science professionals within the NBA has increased dramatically over the past 8 years. So obviously, the NBA has been revolutionized by analytics. The question that we want to answer today is, can sports analytics similarly revolutionize STEM education? So the question that you might be asking is, why do we care about STEM? All right, so the issue is, degrees in STEM are becoming increasingly valuable, yet they are inaccessible to marginalized communities in the US. So for example, 80% of the fastest growing careers in the US are in STEM. So as you can see from this graph, STEM careers are expected to increase by 17% between 2008 and 2018. So the issue is that we have huge underrepresentation problems in the STEM fields in the US. So for example, Latinos and African Americans make up 26% of the population, but they only make up 8% of the STEM workforce. So broadening access to STEM has become a matter of social and economic equality that we must address. So that is what we're seeking to do using sports analytics. So students' future careers are influenced by their favorite pastimes. So for example, if you have a student who's interested and really enjoys robots, it's going to be pretty easy to have them sign up for an out-of-school activity like robotics clubs or science clubs. So this is really good because 60% so in a survey of a FIRST robotics program, 60% of participants in high school went on to have at least one STEM career experience. So robotics clubs are very, very good at translating their participants into STEM careers in the future. So if we take a student who enjoys basketball instead, they're going to spend a lot of their time playing basketball. So the way that you would go professional in basketball, typically, is you would go to the NBA or play professionally. So unfortunately, only 0.3% of over a million high school students are going to go play basketball professionally. So many of these students have a lack of interest or awareness of STEM careers in the first place, so they're not going to sign up for these types of programs. So there's this well-documented interest gap. So as a result, the pipelines for basketball and STEM have complementary strengths and weaknesses. So if you look at the traditional STEM pipeline, the traditional STEM pipeline only reaches students, or typically reaches students, who are predisposed for STEM engagement. However, it has an excellent career pathway. On the other hand, you have the youth basketball pipeline, which has huge reach. As I said, there's millions of students playing basketball every single year, but it has a limited career path. So what we're seeking to do in this project that we're going to talk about today is we want to see if we can bridge these two pipelines and optimize on their respective strengths. So the question is, how can we use sports analytics and science to broaden the appeal of STEM for youth? So traditionally, sports science would be seen as something within educational curriculums would be kind of where you take a word problem and frame it within the context of sports. So the issue with this is that this is very inauthentic because there's not really any difference between calculating the trajectory of a basketball or of a cannonball. And then also, a basketball player is not going to be motivated to solve this problem because how is this an actionable piece of information that you're solving for? Okay? On the other hand, you have professional sports science. So I got to say, like, when I first started reading Grantland in 2012, like, I was blown away by these graphics that Kirk Goldsberry and his team were developing. And this is something, and this tells you exactly what you need to work on as a basketball player. So this is authentic and helpful, and you're motivated to understand it if you're a basketball player. But the issue is that I don't know many high school gyms that have sports view cameras, okay? So the thing is that it's very authentic, but it's inaccessible, okay? But it's really awesome, all right? So to create authentic and accessible metrics, we use old school stats combined with modern visualizations. So for example, shooting percentages can tell you a lot about what a student needs, or what an athlete needs to work on. And at the same time, scoring efficiency does as well, where scoring efficiency is the number of makes times the point value divided by the total number of shots. So the nice thing about these two metrics is that that's like fourth grade curriculum, so it's accessible to a wide range of athletes. So we can combine this with high-level graphical representations. We can actually make these primitive heat maps which contain information that are accessible to the students. So pretty much the students can sit there and say, this is helpful, and I can calculate this, which means that it's pretty effective. So the shooting percentages tells you where do you need to practice from, and scoring efficiency tells you where should you be shooting from in a game. All right? So how can we use this tool to create an authentic and accessible introduction to STEM? So we need to situate the program within existing youth programs as a training tool. So we believe that this approach has two benefits. First, we're going to get students who are interested in basketball and not science. So we're broadening the pipeline. Second, we're going to be working with a huge population of students who will do anything to get better at basketball. So if we provide analytics as a tool to be able to improve as an athlete, they are going to go gangbusters on it. All right? Second off, we want to make it so instead of having me as the scientist dictate to the students, we want to be able to provide analytical tools for the youth athletes to actually explore their own performance and understand it. So this is changing the paradigm where instead of I'm being the technical master of everything, the students are being empowered to understand their own performance using their own stats. And then they'll be intrinsically motivated to understand it better. So in order to keep with the accessible basketball theme, data collection takes place during a shooting drill. So if anyone is familiar with the drill 3-man, 2-ball shooting, pretty much you have 2 balls going and you have a shooter, rebounder, and passer. So we wanted to be able to collect data within something that the students would be like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. So what we did is we just added in a fourth player, where that fourth player had a clipboard and a pencil and this data entry sheet, and they actually recorded all of their data while they were going through the drill. So each player within the group would take 10 shots at each one of these locations, and we would be able to, and the students would be recording this data themselves. And then a big thing is that we wanted to have it so all the athletes were able to record data and take shots, obviously. So we actually rotated through so each athlete had an opportunity to collect data. So we took this data that the students collected, and then we put it into what I call a paint by numbers Python heat map program, where pretty much the value that was calculated by the program corresponded to a heat map, okay, or a color on the heat map for the specific location. So what do we think is going to happen with this program? The first outcome is we will believe that we will attract participants who are not already interested in math and science. The second outcome is that the students will view analytics as a training tool to get better at basketball. And the third outcome is that by making analytics applicable to basketball, the students will be more interested in STEM in general. So just to give you an overview of the clinic structure. So we worked with 98 youth over 6 free clinics. So we organized these clinics by contacting local coaches and saying, hey, do you guys want to get better at shooting? And a lot of them said yes. So we collected, so we gave the students a survey before the start of the program. Then, after a brief warm-up, we entered into this drill where the students would collect their own data. This took about an hour. And then we had a data analysis and discussion section with the heat maps. And this was, and then finally, the students, we collected post-impression data so that we could see how their perceptions changed over the course of this intervention. So we're very interested in motivation and interest, so we used a 5-point Likert type questions to measure perception among the athletes. So so we wanted to make it so it was conversational, so the students wouldn't just circle 2 for everything. So what we did is we made it so it was more conversational than you typically see, and then we coded it from 1 to 5, where 5 is in strong agreement and 1 is negative. So this allowed us to get the distribution of responses for the question before, and then the distribution of responses for the question after. And in order to be able to easily visualize this information, we actually overlaid the 2 graphs. So if I can get this clicker to work, but all right, so if you guys look on the leftmost graph, or sorry, rightmost, in your case, rightmost graph, what you can see is that we have the two different distributions overlaid with each other so we can easily visualize how the treatment affected the overall perception of the population. So how did we evaluate the pre and post tests? So we were interested in three things: basketball training, analytics interest, and STEM interest. And we tested shifts question by question using a one-sided Wilcoxon sign rank test to test for significance. So we couldn't use an ANOVA or a t-test because we can't assume interval data. So we were also interested in the bridges between these categories, so outcome 2 and outcome 3. And we created averaged groups of questions bridging both categories, and we tested the validity of grouping using the Cronbach alpha test, which gives us a measure of intercorrelation between questions. So what are our outcomes? So in terms of the first outcome, we believe that we would attract youth participants who are not already interested in math and science. So the demographic, so students reported their own demographics, and the demographics that we're working with are presently very underrepresented within the STEM field. So we worked with economically disadvantaged students, we had a lot of females, and we had over 50% African American or Latinos. In terms of self-selection, the students self-selected because they really like basketball. So you can see that the students as a whole were very interested in basketball. However, when you look at the responses for how interested are you in studying STEM in college, there is a very different distribution for those results. So it's apparent that we're reaching a population of students who are presently unreached. So the question is, how did participation change perception of training? So as you can see on all 4 of these graphs, we had statistically significant shifts to the right, which indicates that we had increased interest. So just anecdotally, the students really, really enjoyed this. And they actually, once we collected data, they would actually use these graphs to argue with their coaches. They'd say, I told you I could make that 3. You can't argue with that data. And the coach would be like, well, it's sitting right in front of me. I guess I can't. So it's something where the athletes were able to advocate for themselves. So how did participation change perception of analytics, all right? So after participating in the program, students reported a dramatically increased familiarity with sports analytics, as shown in the upper left. They also reported that they could use analytics as a tool in the upper right graph. And then also, they're very interested in learning how they can use math and science to be a better basketball player, as shown in the bottom graph. So overall, we can say that the students' appreciation and interest in analytics was increased by participation in this program. Finally, how did participation change perception of STEM? So on the upper left, you can see that one of the questions was, do you think the topics that you learn in math and science class can make you a better basketball player? We had a huge shift, as you can see in the upper left graph, where students increased the positive response dramatically. They also reported an increased enjoyment of using math and science outside of school, as you can see on the bottom. And then also, this is the very exciting one, how interested are you in studying math and science and engineering in college? We actually had a statistically significant increase in STEM interest, which is exactly what we're looking for, okay? So in terms of creating this bridge between analytics and sports performance, we had good intergroup consistency with an alpha value of 0.8, which means that we can accept this as being good, and you can see that we had this perception shift to the right. And anecdotally, we can actually see the student responses change to incorporate this information. So one student responded in response to, what do I need to work on shooting? He said originally, I need to work on my footwork and form. And then at the end, he said, I need to work on my mid-range and three-pointers. So you can see that they're internalizing the spatial information and data that is contained within these heat maps. So outcome 3 is the analytics STEM bridge. And we also had a good intergroup consistency of 0.16. And you can see that we had this little group all the way in the 2 section that really hated math and science when we first started, and they actually rejoined the group at the end, which is very exciting. But anecdotally, this trend is captured by the following. So when asked if math and science could help him improve at basketball, he said originally, no, because we're learning about proofs, and proofs don't help you with basketball. And I think he's actually correct in that, okay? And at the end, he said, yes, because you need to know the percentages to know where you can shoot from. So the really cool thing about this is this student was obviously taking proofs in high school, or I can't remember if it was a high school or middle school, but he was taking proofs in class, and by using accessible metrics like percentages, he was able to sit there and remember, like, hey, I learned something in 4th grade that's related to this, and I'm going to identify this very simplistic mathematics as math and science. So that's something he's feeling like he's a scientist, which is excellent. Okay? So what have we learned from using heat maps and analytics for youth training? So first off, we observed that analytics increases a player's understanding of their own performance and provides them with information on what they need to improve and how they can improve. So the second thing is analytics demonstrates how STEM concepts can explain and improve athletic performance. So I was running one of the clinics, and one of the students did a lot worse than his friends, and he was trying to figure out how to explain this deficiency. And he came up to me and says, "My arms got really tired at the end of the clinic because we took 140 shots." I said, "Yeah, that can happen." And he says, "That's a source of experimental error." And I say, "That is a source of experimental error." So then he walked around the rest of the clinic telling everyone that, "Look at my shot chart, this is experimental error." Okay? So the thing is that, like, besides being like a little bit funny, it's also an example of, once again, the students are bringing in the knowledge that they had in science class and deploying it within basketball and using it to, most importantly, make it so they don't look bad, all right, which is a very big motivation. So the question is that, so what I just described is a very small, hour-long session. So you might say, how can this affect things on a large level? So as I said previously, I'm the STEM director for Fourth Family Incorporated, which is a grassroots nonprofit based out of Albany, New York. So I can say that in the past 4 years, I've used sports science to work with thousands of kids, all right? So this ranges from doing STEM outreach, where we do community events, where we work with, like, literally take over a gym, and we do a program called Science the Slam, where we use the slam dunk contest as a framework to teach the scientific method. All right, and then we have like high-level dunkers do slam dunks, and then we use DIY biomechanics equipment to measure how high someone can jump, and the students predict who's going to win based on jump height. And so we do STEM outreach events. Then also we have some basic curriculum, where pretty much like I'll go into a science class, and we'll actually do experiments using DIY biomechanics equipment. And then finally, one of the big things is that this is something that's distinctly basketball, okay? In order to be able to do this, you need to understand and love basketball. So one of the cool things is that the students I'm working with at Albany High are like the captains of the basketball team and the captains of the soccer team. So in this bottom left picture, me and 3 of my high school seniors last year traveled down to Princeton, where they had a poster at an IEEE education conference where they presented their own work on doing sports science outreach in the community, and they were like talking to STEM education professionals, talking about systematic inequalities in the STEM education system. So they really buy into the social justice message and the equity message as well. So finally, this is also very useful for basketball. So the cool thing is you can see that the same 2 students on the right are the same 2 students who went down to Princeton with me. So we actually ran a basketball camp with LaMarcus Aldridge of the Spurs. He came to Albany to work with us, which was awesome, all right? And me and my high school students built an open source biomechanics lab where we tried to replicate the rookie combine using like a $250 budget and a bunch of Arduinos. And it actually went really well, which was awesome. And in terms of having the students feel like they have a voice in this, the students actually came up. Do you guys see that graphic right next to the picture of LaMarcus Aldridge? So the students actually came up with that graphic. I had no idea that you could represent stuff like that. And the thing is that I'm walking around and I'm seeing this everywhere, and the thing is that my students were like, let's apply this to explain scientific information. So they're really contributing and they're really internalizing this, which is awesome. So the thing is that the basketball side of this is also growing. So Fourth Family is partnering with gifted athletes, and we're actually running 2 basketball camps this summer with DJ Augustine of the Orlando Magic and Miles Turner of the Indiana Pacers. And we're gonna have the sports science component, and we're gonna integrate the analytics that I just presented into that camp as well. So in summary, the social impact of sports and athletics extends far beyond wins and championships. So we live in a world of, well, not since the 60s, but not since the 60s have we seen this level of athlete advocacy for social issues. So whether it be D-Wade, LeBron, CP3, and Carmelo making that powerful statement for social justice at the ESPYs, to Colin Kaepernick's kneel protest against police brutalization. So what our work shows is that the analytics community can also take a stand for social justice and education equality. Because the tools that we use and what we do here is awesome, okay? So there's 3,500 people at this conference. Think about how big of a difference we can make in education around the world, all right? So why limit the impact of analytics to wins and losses when it can revolutionize STEM education? Thank you. Whew.
So now we're gonna do a 5-minute Q&A. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll run down to you with a microphone.
Thanks. Just wondering if you'd gotten a chance to look if the survey results differ by gender.
So we haven't looked at that quite yet. So I'm currently in the last 3 months of my doctorate, and in biomedical engineering. So pretty much we just looked at it. The group that we wanted to look at was we wanted to look at basketball interest. So pretty much we're defining everyone as basketball players, but we're going to be doing a lot more of these programs, and we're going to start breaking it down by gender and ethnicity. But we haven't looked at that quite yet.
Excuse me. Besides, over here.
Are you right in the light? Oh, sorry.
Besides the heat map, were there other instruments that you used?
So for the results that I presented today, that was only heat maps. So in terms of the histograms that you were looking at, those were only heat maps. So it was an 1.5-hour long clinic using the heat maps. So we've also made it so we've actually created a web app just for the conference. So if you look at my, I think, Twitter page or whatever it's called, you can actually access the app off of that. Oh, yeah, totally. So one of my high school, as I said, one of my high school students is the captain, was the captain of the soccer team. And I've actually been working with him on the science of the shot, where pretty much we do heat maps, where we try to look at how goalie position affects like how much of the goal you can see and score on, and then kind of say, okay, if we put the ball here and the goalie's here, what is your opportunity? So hopefully I would think that that would tell you about passing or the importance of passing in the box or like not passing or preventing passing in the box. So we're definitely looking at other sports.
I was just wondering, you're going out and launching a career now, no doubt. And I was wondering if you're going to collect your data longitudinally and learn where these children end up and yeah, how it turns out in the end.
So we haven't done anything formally yet, but actually, so the 4 students that I was talking about earlier, I've actually been working with them for the past 3 or 4 years.
Nice.
So I'm pleased to say that all 4 of them are in college now, either playing sports and studying science or just studying science. So we have 4 students who are in school right now studying science, but I definitely do want to do that formally.
Right here. How do you make sure that you keep building on the momentum that you generate with this initial interest in analytics through basketball, and that kids don't, move on and it's almost like never happened?
So the really nice thing is that we have a lot of buy-in from coaches. So the thing is that what we want to do and what we have done, I would argue, is that we've framed this as an important training tool. So the thing is that the kids are very, very motivated to get better at basketball. So the thing is they're motivated to get better at basketball. If using this stuff makes them better at basketball, we hope that they'll continue to participate. But the nice thing is that Fourth Family is a grassroots nonprofit, so we have a lot of people in the community who are working with a lot of kids. So we can kind of keep it going with that way. So thank you.
Over here. Do you have any thoughts about whether you're going to have some kind of experimental setup where you can determine whether this sort of approach is significantly better than, say, some other form of engagement in STEM activities?
Oh, yeah. So I actually kind of accidentally set that up. where when I first started doing the STEM outreach stuff using sports science, I actually went super duper high tech with it, where pretty much I'd be like, I'm a PhD student in biomedical engineering, so I'm gonna make this as good as possible. So I was trying to do like machine vision stuff and things like that, but I realized that the fancier I got with the science, the less the students were engaged, because it became less something about what they knew and more about me having a kind of talking down to them about what I knew because I'm a scientist. So, but that is something that we definitely need to do. We're working on that right now in terms of doing real paired comparisons.
So I think we're gonna have one last question.
Hi.
Over here.
So I saw that the data you presented was survey-based for their interests. Do you also have metrics in terms of their grades before and after in STEM?
So short answer, no. So the thing is that in order to sit there and in order to get grades and everything like that, you need to have a lot more access within the school system. So we were doing everything, everything was IRB approved, et cetera. But the thing is that getting into the school system to monitor grades is more complicated than I'm aware of as a biomedical engineer.
So perfect. Then let's give a big round of applause for John. Thank you.
Thank you.